and we're rolling. All right, so welcome friends to our 5th session together on this Deep Dive 2 journey. Today we are going to dig a little deeper, do a little bit of application of our learning to mini tasks. So as usual, I'll stay zoomed out as we begin just to take a look at the sequencing of our learning. We began with our intro session thinking about, okay, what are those foundational content or pieces of content and activities we can use to coach teachers to develop higher quality skills lists and instructional sequences. Then in weeks 2 and 3, we spent our time considering what an aligned skills list was, what was an appropriately customized skill that was aligned to the standards and tasks without being so specific that it was not enduring any longer. In session 3, we applied some of that learning that we had been doing about aligned skills lists to then, we didn't quite get to workshopping of our individual skills lists, but we did do more practice with trying to rewrite skills so that we knew that they were appropriately aligned to the skills and standards while also remaining focused on enduring skills that kids can take across content areas and grid levels. So now we're living in the realm of mini tasks, or the sequencing of instruction within a module. Last week, we spent some time looking at resources. We looked at a couple of mini task collections and talked about the characteristics of a mini task. So this week, we're gonna apply, again, same structure. This week, we'll apply the learning. We'll do a couple of group activities to practice creating an aligned mini task. And then we'll have breakout rooms. We've got the lovely Monique here with us tonight, and she'll help facilitate one of the breakout rooms while I'll be in the other breakout room. And that will be an opportunity for you to work on your own module or get it workshopped, whatever is gonna be appropriate for you. We'll aim for 15 to 20 minutes in the breakout rooms. And then of course you can catalyze that work you're doing in the work session today when we have our one-on-one sessions too. Oopsie daisies. And Monique's put the syllabus in the chat if anybody wants to have it on their screen as I'm chatting. I know a couple people popped in. One more nod I want to pay is to the 3rd page of the syllabus here. I've got some of the key resources that we have worked with or have addressed during our sessions together. I also put in the mini task collections right into the syllabus. So those links are handy for you there. And then as always, I send out the recording for our sessions, but I always link them at the bottom of the syllabus too. So if you lose the email, the syllabus is a nice HQ for our Deep Dive 2 work. You'll always have the links there. Okay, so let's dig in. We're gonna start, as we have been, taking the first 10 minutes to talk about and review those sessions that I'd asked you to look at for pre-work. And those sessions were Instructional Cycle 3. Again, the instructional cycle that's focused on our mini tasks or our sequencing of instruction. And sessions 7 and 8 were the ones that we had looked at offline as pre-work for today's work together. So session 7 asks participants to head in and really works on analyzing full sequences of mini tasks to assess their alignment to the skills list and thus to the overall module task. Session 8 asks participants to actually conduct another pitfall analysis, but this time of the full sequencing of instruction rather than just the skills list, and of course, rather than the task. So I'll put 5 minutes on the clock. Go ahead and refresh your own brains on the content that you saw and that you took a closer look at in sessions 7 and 8. And I'm going to ask you to note in the chat not quite how you would facilitate the content yet, but I would just like you, actually let's do this in partners this go around since we've got the whole group tonight. So I popped some partners in the chat, Ryan and Rob, Nana and Kristen, Jane and Marina, and then Jamie and Monique can work together as well. And what I'd like you to do is take a few minutes to look at sessions 7 and 8, review the notes you may have jotted down to yourself when you were looking at them previously, and decide what the key areas or takeaways for teachers are from these sessions. Then I want you to share that with a partner, and then we'll come together and do a whole group debrief. I'm going to put these questions in the chat, and then I'll stop sharing my screen. Oh, and let's see, Nada might not be here yet. So how about Monique, can I have you work with Kristen? And Jamie, you're gonna fly solo for this first part.
That sounds good. Can you reiterate what we're doing again?
Yeah, right. So I'm actually gonna put it in the chat. I'd like you to, again, take a few minutes to look back at sessions 7 and 8, review any notes you may have captured when you were reviewing those sections, and then identify, I'm gonna write this in, key sections or activities that you feel are highest leverage for teachers. Share your thinking with a partner, and then we'll come back together. And actually, I'll leave these sessions up on my screen too. Okay, let's come to a close with the partner conversations, and I'll ask partner 1 in these groups just to share out one activity or key piece of content that you think is very high leverage from these 2 sessions, and that would really help teachers gain a better understanding of what we mean by aligned mini tasks and aligned overall instructional sequences. So let's hear from Ryan, Kristen, and Jane.
Oh, okay.
Whomever would like to begin. Just one or 2 sections that you feel are really high leverage from session 7 or 8.
I'll go. Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Both Marina and I love the pitfalls checklist, and she was also really pleased to see the car self-review activity in there. So she was pleased to see that in session 8. But also we were sort of discussing that sometimes it's hard to hold back on giving them resources and to be very targeted with the resources, because you want to give them the resources all the time, like as a whole, like we get them, and because they're all good. So it's to be very targeted with the resources.
Yeah. Which that leads me into kind of one of my lines of thought when I was going through. I felt like these 2 sessions had a lot of really key resources in them that I'd want to use all of, like the basics, the pitfall checklist, and the curriculum alignment rubric, which obviously is over. You're giving people 3 different ways to check and revise their work. So I'm with you, kind of prioritizing. They certainly move in sequence. I would absolutely start with basics, especially when people were just getting into designing or revising mini tasks. But then toward the end, right, that leads into another question, which is one of those, the pitfall checklist or the curriculum alignment rubric, is one better left for folks to use as pre-work or in their time without you? And is one really going to be used better in a collaborative meeting?
Are you asking the question? Or
yeah, I have some thoughts on it based on what I've seen, but yeah, I'm wondering which might you leave somebody to use on their own versus
I think that, well, me personally, I think because you've got the video to sort of help you through the self-review. So if they have a go at that themselves, but if they get tangled up in it, then you can have a discussion with them. Anyway, that's just my view.
Yeah, I agree, because that's kind of what we talked about as well, Rob and I, because I was kind of talking about, because I always think back to my own module writing experience, and I know when I write my modules, I get so caught up in the mini tasks and writing great teaching experiences that I kind of lose track of where my skills list is. So I think, so for me personally, like the highest leverage bit for me was just checking that formatting, because I know that's what I've been doing over the last week, just making sure that everything is in there. They're all ability to, it's all kind of mapped out in that way. But in using that pitfall checklist and the curriculum alignment rubric, I really think the rubric works better because it kind of gives more detail. I know in the PLCs, I've been trying to do that drip feed thing as well, where I don't give them everything. So we've just been using the pitfalls checklist, and it hasn't necessarily inspired them into action. Does that make sense? Whereas I think the review
task
rubric kind of does.
pitfall checklist or the latter one?
The latter one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the latter one. Yeah. Yeah, I just found it wasn't as, I don't know, I don't think it, I think because it's, I know this sounds silly because it's on a separate screen. Like, you know, the other one you can pull it up and it's actually on your module. I think that's more, that just works better for me. I don't know.
It also feels pretty abstract just because the ladder itself is a more abstract situation than the task. Even though I know at the end of the day it's not, it feels that way for people. So I think also that gets back to what Jane and Marina were also discussing, which is being able to just pull up the peer review or curriculum alignment rubric and look at the indicators for a good to go skills list and check them against your module all on one screen. It does impact, I think, your experience compared to having a pitfalls checklist next to you and your module on a screen, for instance. So yeah, nice inputs. Kristen, how about you? One or two sections from session 7 or 8 that you thought are really high value?
Monique and I really also liked the basics for obvious reasons. And I'm thinking about everything that everyone is saying about introducing things at different times, just to really allow teachers time to process and work with it. And I'm thinking actually one of my PLCs is working really quickly right now through the instructional cycle 2. So whereas we're not really focusing on the ladder yet, I'm wondering if I can just pull the basics into it now and use that now just as like a quick check, because some of them are really trying to write their own ladders and their own mini tasks, and then go back to it later when we get to instructional cycle 3 and maybe use the rubric more carefully there, and just throw the basics in there now for those teachers who are kind of ahead of the game.
Yeah, 100% and for that. And that's where I'd love to encourage everyone to continue thinking is what are some of the maybe higher level, not quite as in the weeds yet, but resources I know that I've used or that I've seen in these deep dive experiences that I could be bringing into instructional cycle 1 or 2. Knowing one, for instance, is so focused on the development of a quality task, something like the basics is the appropriate kind of grain size to bring in to teachers that, because teachers obviously care a lot about the actual mini lessons that they're putting in front of students to move them from prompt to product. So this is a great idea. Any other ideas from the rest of the group about items you saw in maybe session 7 or 8 or any of the other parts of IC3 that you think, oh, that'd be nice to bring in now when my groups are in IC1? Probably not the curriculum alignment rubric yet. They're not really digging into design of the ladder that deeply yet. Basics. Ryan, you used the pitfall checklist a bit.
I've actually used that video that we looked at a couple weeks ago that I think Marina found in the top corner, the difference between an assignment and an assessment.
Excellent.
Yeah, it just came up because, well, this one of my PLCs kind of gave an assessment that they had to give, and then instead of doing find and teach, they created a module to reteach the assessment to basically figure out where the students were weak and then use it as an. So they were really talking about how using it as an assignment, they got a lot more out of their students rather than as an assessment. So it just seemed to click at that time. So it was great.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing. And thanks again to Marina for highlighting that video again, because it had fallen off my radar as well. And Marina, we're bringing it into the teacher leader meetings that we're doing now. All thanks to you, my friend.
Cool. Well, I won't take credit. It was there on the side.
I know, but you said you were
actually like the first thing at the top there. It was because I'm finding I'm using those active facilitation like things on the side more, and it was just. I'm glad that we had a chance in this time to actually watch it, because otherwise, or preview things. Otherwise, I'll be honest, I probably would have been like, oh, video, I don't have to preview that.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's scoot into, I want to bring in an activity today before we jump into some mini tasks. We'll practice offering some feedback on a mini task and then hop into some breakout rooms. And I want us to practice as a group how we design aligned mini tasks. So last week, we again worked as a group just to practice how we might customize skills to ensure that they were aligned to this task demands, the discipline, and the standards without being so specific as to be rendered not enduring anymore. And I want to do that same activity with an overall mini task before we hop into the more applied items on our agenda. So I've got a sample module that I'm going to pull up on my screen. This is the one that we reviewed together last week. What I'd like you to do, can you see that task? Can you read it on my screen? Okay, I'll read it aloud and just point out a couple of the focus standards. And then we'll just move through the process together of practicing how to create an aligned a mini task that has product, prompt, and scoring guide that's super aligned to the skill it's looking to help students develop. So the task says, after reading the address of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry Clay Patt's editorial, write an essay in which you analyze how the author's perspectives shaped their portrayal of John Brown. Support your discussion with evidence from the text. What conclusions can you draw about how these writers' perspectives exemplify the two sides of the conflict in the Civil War? So a pretty juicy history writing assignment here. Texts give kids great opportunity to identify two very different perspectives on John Brown's take on abolition. The focus standards are such. We've got reading standard 6 for middle grades, which asks our point of view standard. It asks the kids to identify aspects of a text that reveal an author's point of view or purpose. So it is asking that, or it's expecting that students are going to be able to identify items like loaded language, or the inclusion or removal / avoidance of particular facts. So we really want to make sure that the kids are reading both texts with those items in mind, looking for particularly loaded language or areas where they see people have intentionally included or removed certain facts in order to bolster their perspective or case on an event. That's really the one I want to highlight for now, because we're just going to practice writing a mini task for one of the skills in the reading process. So have these in your brain. We've got our task, we've got our reading focus standard. And we know that mini tasks, as we mentioned last time, they're formative assessments. They're these reality checks, right? That really help us identify students' overall progress as they move toward completing a reading for the purpose of the assignment and then writing in response to their reading. So we analyzed alignment between a mini task's targeted skill, prompt, and product and scoring guide last week. And I want to try to apply that analysis, develop our own alignment, just as a brainstorm together as a full group before we head in and look at more mini tasks in this module. So I'm actually just going to shoot us down, just going to share this on my screen rather than with everyone so that we can brainstorm as a group. I'm going to remove this. I don't want it there anymore. So I've got the task and that reading focus standard on my screen. I will make them blue just so they're distinguishable. And I went ahead and went into the reading process section of this person's instructional or skills list rather. And just went in and pulled the skill that we actually looked at together as a group in our previous session. It's the skill in the reading process that expects students to analyze the text for author point of view. So the skill definition is the ability to identify aspects of a text that reveal an author's point of view or purpose. What I'd love for you to have up on your screen as we're doing this brainstorm is our basics sheet. So if you have that up, I'll have the module up. Excuse me, our brainstorm sheet up. And I don't want to clutter us with being in the module template or anything right now. I just want to brainstorm. So we know our skill, analyzing point of view. We have our skill definition, ability to identify aspects of a text that reveal an author's point of view. My first question to you is, does this skill adequately address the skill that students will need to develop in order to address their reading focus standard and the demands of the task? Is it too narrow, too broad, or is it meeting that just right area we want it to meet? I'll put it in the chat so people can see it too. Too broad, too narrow, or do you feel like it's right? It's addressing the reading focus standard and the overall demands of the task. You just offer verbal response or write in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of just right or okays. This is actually, yeah, one that we worked on together as a group in one of our previous sessions. And I'm agreeing with the group here. I believe that this is meeting that just right criteria for us. It is aligned with the reading standard. The way I know that is that it's asking or it's expecting that kids will identify aspects of a text that reveal author point of view. That to me, if I was highlighting my skills list looking for clear evidence of my reading focus standard, that is my evidence. You know, very clearly the skills, focusing the kids in on that R6 work. But it's also narrow enough so that it's not, or excuse me, it's not so narrow that it's only really focusing kids on identifying aspects of Emerson's point of view on John Brown, right? So I know it's not too narrow. It's not just asking kids to know how Emerson and Pate felt about things. It's asking them to do something that I know I want them to do for the rest of their lives. Be able to look at text and identify what the author's perspective is, and thus identify what the bias might be or how the author might have used language in order to convey or persuade readers to agree with a particular point. So I'm with you. We're good to go there. So now let's just think about, let me pull up my basics on the screen. You have yours on your screen. Let's think about the product. We want to make sure my basics sheet just identifies that the product is something that students can turn in and that it lets the teacher know that the student has developed or is working toward developing the skill at hand. So I am asking you guys, what is a product the teacher can use to tell whether students are on track toward developing the skill or that they need more support? Put that in the chat. What's a product the teacher can use to tell whether the kids are on track toward developing the skill or that they need more support? Yep, Marina's got an annotation activity. I'll just jot down. You guys can put it in the chat or just say out loud and I'll note him. Make this a little smaller so our task is on the screen. What's a product that a teacher can use to identify if students are actually reading the text and identifying aspects of that text that say something about the author point of view? Nice, okay. Kristen's thinking of graphic organizer where they have the annotation, the evidence on one side, and then describe the point of view that the evidence conveys on the other. Very nice. Next, Robert, same item there. Quick write from Jamie, including text evidence. And we're getting into, yeah, close reading activities. So keep that, we'll keep that in mind. Right now, I'm really intentionally wanting us to think just about the product, the prompt, and the scoring guide before we ever even get into what strategies we'll use to help the kids complete the product. So yeah, we've got a couple of different items here. For the sake of example today, let's picture it's we're having them complete a graphic organizer after annotating. Yeah, the annotation activity / graphic. What do you guys want to use? I'll say graphic organizer because that's pretty clear and it implies annotation. So next step is I'm going to head back to my basics. Thanks, Marina. And just point out, I really like some of the guiding language in the basics. Our resource here says a prompt needs to be directions to students about developing the product. Really often when people get into designing mini tasks for themselves, they're writing directions to themselves rather than to the kids. So we really want to make sure we're offering clear directions to the kids so that they know and they can work toward developing the product for the day. Let me get back to my sheet. So we need to be able to jot down, just for example's sake again, a quick prompt. A prompt that is written as directions to students about developing the graphic organizer. So can anybody throw something in the chat or verbalize? Just a quick example for us so we know, hey, this prompt is aligned to the product. It is asking kids or giving them clear directions to get to that product.
Couldn't it just be like after reading text X?
Yep.
Complete the graphic organizer where you, and then like just almost use the
skill.
Thank you.
Sorry.
But no, that's about where I am. That's all I've got. Yeah, just use just like making sure it aligns with the language that's in the skill.
Yeah. So how about us, it would be like in order to identify, oh, there Kristen goes. Yeah, 3 pieces of textual evidence, we'll say. And determine what that evidence says about author point of view, whatever. There we go, on the right path. Because we're starting, I'm just gonna put in blue what our answers are. We're starting from the skill, so we know we're really actually aligning the product and now the prompt for the kids to the skill we really want them practicing and mastering for the day. So next item on our agenda as we're building out this mini task is the scoring guide. So I really like another piece of guiding language from the basics. It says, scoring guides should identify elements to look for in the student product, things that will provide evidence that students are developing the targeted skill. So things that will provide evidence that the kids are just developing the skill for the day. This I find, sorry, I keep floating back to the wrong doc. That can be really useful framing for teachers who often put items relevant to participation in their scoring guides. So I see that a lot. Like student meets expectations for the product if it'll just say something like complete the reading or work collaboratively with partner. So you'll see teachers are still thinking mostly about the instructional strategies and if kids are engaging with them, rather than what the actual evidence that the students are developing the skill is. So what would be our clear evidence that kids were developing the skill of identifying aspects of the text that reveal an author's point of view?
Well, we should see, are we typing or talking?
However you would like.
Oh, okay. You should see 3 pieces of evidence that do reveal point of view, not just 3 random pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
Yep.
I want to move it a step further because something that's really prevalent in the reading standard for kids of this age is that they're looking at aspects of the text that reveal the author point of view, not just the author flat out saying, here's how I feel about John Brown, you know?
Right.
But we really want them looking at, well, what did Emerson actually do in his address to convey a point of view about this guy? So
I feel like you might even be able to take it a step further to make the prompt for students actually, or the graphic organizer actually include where they have to choose, was it loaded language, was it inclusion or avoided of particular fact? So they have to actually identify what the strategy the author used or whatever, you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
that's what I'm getting at too, actually. In looking back at the prompts that we jotted quickly as a group, I was thinking, that actually doesn't really cut it for me. That doesn't really give the kids the clearest direction I can give them about how I want them, about the purpose for reading this particular piece of the text for the day. So I'm with you.
And connecting that to connecting that also to the annotation activity, like you could even have them do, like in their annotations, they might have to use, like there might be a little key where they're annotating like the different kind of language moves, or it's not really rhetorical strategies at this age, but that's what we're building up to.
Right.
Like we'll understand how language is used for a purpose.
Right.
And then there could be something in the graphic organizer where they'd also have to check. I really like I think even like a checklist.
Totally. And where we're going with this, I want to close up right now so we can get to our other items. But what's really cool is we've basically backed our way into the right graphic organizer for the kids, right? And then it just becomes very clear, like, oh, let me just jot or create this really briefly, or I know exactly how I'm going to ask them to structure their note-taking papers tomorrow or whatever it's going to be. But when you start, that's because we started with the skill. I find very, very often folks start with the strategy when they're trying to create these things, because you immediately have in your head the annotation strategy, whatever it is that you're comfortable with, that works for the kids. But I find heading this way, starting from skill down, and then typically, the sequencing is skill, product, prompt, and scoring guide. After you've identified those items for yourself, they're aligned with the skill you really want kids learning for the day. And typically you've worked your way into a pretty clear strategy or organizer, whatever it is for them. Any other thoughts on this before we head back into the John Brown module, look at some other mini tasks?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it would be a best practice with teachers to do it just like this and kind of pull it out of core tools?
I was talking with my colleague Nicole and Monique and Jamie about that earlier, because at first I was like, I'll just open up a template mini task in core tools. And I really think that it's a coach instinct, it's a coach move. When you think about going in, the reason I did it on this page, and the reason Nicole, my colleague, did the same, is because we just wanted to remove the distraction of core tools and all the little boxes you have to click into and pop things into.
I mean, I really like it. I just wanted to make sure that this was something you think would transfer to PLCs as a best practice, and not just wouldn't get, because I know we want to keep them in core tools, but there's every once in a while just pulling them out of there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. We want to keep them in core tools and close to their work. However, if you can do something like this that drives faster learning for them, I support that, and I think we need to privilege that, especially when it's a quick brainstorm like this. It's a little bit harder to brainstorm in a module with a big group anyhow.
I completely agree with Marina, and I was actually wondering, did you share the link to this actual document that we're on?
No, but I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just so we can go back to it if we want to do the same task with our groups. That would be great.
Yeah, and this is just a little homemade activity. Nicole did it with her group last week, and so I just grabbed a skill from the reading process section of this module and thought, okay, let's just work through it together. And just have your brainstorm paper up, and I like the basics doc up, so that I can point people to the specific language they might check back on for themselves when they're designing. Yeah, just have those two items up, and then put whatever your task and reading standard is. That's why I keep it focused on practice with a skill from the reading process section, so that you can just throw the reading focus standard in here. Keeps it simple. Thanks for doing that learning with me. Okay, so how about, we're going to do a truncated activity ahead so we can spend at least 10 minutes in our breakout sessions. But what I'd like to do is head in and practice providing some feedback on a sample mini task. Oh, maybe that document's private. Sorry about that, Jane. Let me make sure you're able to access it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's not very pretty or anything, but gets the job done.
Doesn't need to be elegant.
Okay, so if you can please head back into the sample module that Monique had popped into the chat. I'll put it in again here. We're sticking with our friend John Brown. And what I'd like to do is actually open up, let me grab one more link for you. Let's actually get in and we'll stay focused on this analyzing point of view skill. What I'd like you to do is click into the mini task listed underneath that analyzing point of view. It's called contrasting point of view. I'm going to open it up full screen. You're welcome to keep watching on my screen, or if you do want to pop in though, I like to have that. I like to do it that way myself. So head into the contrasting point of view mini task. And we're going to actually use a modified protocol. We've got a larger skills and instruction workshopping protocol. Here we go. It is helpful, can also be a little bit overwhelming. I'm going to put the link for the protocol in the chat for you, but we're not going to use it in full today. So it might just be something you have up and bookmarked for yourself for later. But for our purposes today, I would just like us to look at our mini task. We're going to do this individually and then share out with a partner. I'd like you to use the process I'm putting in the chat. So head in and look at the whatever the standard is in the mini task. Identify the skill. And then move through those parts that we all were just brainstorming together for yourself. Look at whether the product is a product and how it helps students demonstrate evidence that they're developing the skill. Check out that prompt. Is it giving the kids, like our basics doc said, clear directions for what they need to be doing? Check out the scoring guide. Does the scoring guide, I'm going to go back to my trusty basics doc. Does the scoring guide give the teacher evidence that students are developing the targeted skill? And let's just look at those for right now. Just those items. We won't dig into strategies. I'd just like you to look individually at the skill, the standard, the prompt, and the scoring guide. So I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock here. Look individually and determine for yourself if this mini task, if those items of the mini task are aligned and are meeting the expectations I've put in our chat. Okay. So find your stopping point in that mini task. And here's what we're going to do quickly before we head into our small rooms. I would like you to head, or watch me, whatever you prefer. I'm heading back into session 7, IC7 session 7. And I'm checking out our trusty Coaching for Impact. Let me make this a bit bigger. Coaching for Impact section was at the bottom of the session. And I'm checking out the 3rd tip in Coaching for Impact, which is going to give some guidance about how to provide feedback on your teacher's mini tasks. So it offers the common patterns and suggested coach feedback you might give in one of those trusty data tips charts. So I'm actually going to put this in the chat for you. And what I'd like you to do is just use one of those possible feedback stems and work some feedback for yourself. Just put it in the chat. Feedback about this contrasting point of view mini task. Any questions? Okay. I'll pop them in the chat too so that they are in writing as well as verbal.
Megan, I have a question about the document. It looks like the data tips chart is mostly for...
It is primarily focused on the skills list, huh?
Yeah, like focus on it all together. And I just wondered if we had one that was focused particularly on a mini task. I mean, if not, you can easily modify some of these, but it seems like that might exist.
Let me see.
Everything else helpful seems to exist somewhere.
Right. I think if we, I'm going to use that handy trick of heading back to the table of contents and see if I can identify any other sessions where I might find good data or feedback stems for mini tasks. Could be in 6.
It would be awesome if all of those like feedback things were archived in one like a resource.
So that's actually, I know, was it Ryan or Rob who'd popped them all into a doc? But actually, you just brought up for me, I'm going to ask Kimba on the back end if they're all in one Google Doc.
Which would be awesome, because then I would have that up like constantly, all the time.
I know.
Oh, Ryan has one.
So some of these, you're identifying something that may be a bit of a gap, which is that even I went back into session 6, and the feedback stems here are still quite focused on the overall skills list. I did find there were somewhat more specific stems in session 7 for mini tasks, but writing a little note to myself, I can see having just a few more for coaches to provide really specific feedback on the items within the mini task. Thanks, Ryan. So let's see, in our time left, how about share if you have been working, has anybody created a piece of feedback that you feel bold enough to share with the group? If not, it's okay. We're all in this together.
I wrote something in the chat. It's not very polished. I'd probably spend more time polishing it, but my feedback would be around the prompt. Like, I just feel like when I look at the basics checklist, it's a little clearer for students of exactly what they are doing to show how they've identified the point of view.
Yeah.
And in the instructional strategies, I know we weren't really supposed to spend too much time on that. It seems like there is some type of annotation or graphic organizer or something, but maybe it could just be clear in the prompt for students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's interesting about this one that I don't really understand when I go back out to the overall task is why it's asking kids to decide which point of view they believe. If they're conducting an analysis as the task and the reading standards say, to actually start understanding how people use language to convey perspective. So that's something I'd want to touch base on with the author too. You're right. I think a nice place to start is the prompt. It's also Ryan, hero of the day. Also, I'm not sure that the prompt adequately addresses the skill. If we really just start looking for that basic alignment again, hey, is this giving the kids clear direction to read a text in order to identify parts of the text that reveal an author's perspective? Not really. It's just saying to identify a point of view in each text. So we can, the first piece of feedback might be that, using your basics, just saying, hey, let's think about if this is providing the kids clear direction to actually get into each text and look for, 2 or 3 aspects like loaded language or inclusion of specific facts that might reveal author's point of view. Yeah. So we, I hope you don't mind, I privileged our time today, I prioritized our time rather in order to move through this thought process of starting with the skill and making sure the skill is aligned with product, prompt, and scoring guide rather than heading into breakout rooms again. We do have a few minutes left. What I'd like for you to do is just open up your own module on your own screen, the one you've been working on, receiving some peer review feedback on, and just go look at the reading process section just on your own screen and note for yourself. You might even head into a mini task in your reading process section. Note for yourself if you know that there are specific mini tasks you want to head back in and make sure are aligned in the way that we talked about alignment today. So just head back into your own module, I'll put, 3-4 minutes on the clock here, head into my library, your own module, and look at your reading process section in particular and identify if there are any mini tasks there that you want to head back into and make sure are aligned and are meeting the basics checklist. So I'll put 3 minutes on the clock here, and then we'll just close with our next steps for next week. As you're looking, I'm going to put one question in the chat that I'd love for you to offer a written response to. Just as you're looking at your own mini tasks and thinking, I want to look at that one. That one's pretty aligned. I want to look at that one. I'm wondering, what aspects of mini tasks do you want to focus on for your own module design? Maybe your prompts really just aren't very clear for the kids. Or maybe it's scoring guides that really get you. And you need to make sure that you head back into your scoring guides and that they're clear in providing evidence that demonstrates kids have mastered the skill. So whatever it is for you, just pop in the chat. What aspects of mini tasks do you want to focus on for your own module design, your own work? Ooh, Kristen, interesting. I think that's super common. Needing to break down some mini tasks into multiple mini tasks. You realize, oh, I'm asking them to work on multiple skills here. Which means you may want to actually just zoom out from the mini tasks altogether and head back into IC2, thinking about the overall skills list and doing more of a coding activity or a pitfalls check of the skills list, not the mini tasks yet. But what's cool about what you just said is going into the mini tasks helped you realize, oh, I might be skipping, or I might be conflating skills or skipping over skills in my overall flow, my overall sequence. So that's pretty neat. Excellent. Some additional focus on prompts, which it's always harder than you think it is once you get into it. But even I'm thinking back as I was looking at some of your, can everyone see my screen? Some of your notes here about the prompt to our sample, which is John Brown activity that we did. And when we were really able to go through it a little bit more and assess alignment with that standard that we were targeting, we too realized, oh, our prompt's not very clear for the kids. It's not actually giving them the direction we want to give them in order to really work toward mastering this skill. So really nice takeaways here. Okay, let's close up. Got the syllabus on the screen. And this will take us into our final session together, session 6. We will zoom out from skills lists and mini tasks to take a look at larger implementation plans, and we'll talk more about different coaching moves that we definitely use in I3 and that we want to continue to be using to move teachers through these instructional cycles and also help them and their teacher leaders and administrators assess progress through that cycle. So we'll look more at analytics and then do a little bit of closing activities. And I also, we've got y'all on the books for your one-to-one sessions as well. So not too much pre-work for next time. It's really just this one. I'm going to pop it in the chat. And that is we're going to have our one-on-one sessions with you to discuss your modules. And then at the end of Deep Dive 2, Deep Dive 2, we'll ask you to resubmit to National Peer Review. So you're not resubmitting yet, but the real work here is to keep working on your own module and really apply these practices. Oh, excuse me. I'm actually I put the wrong stuff in the chat, so sorry. Disregard. Sorry, team. Here's your prep work. So again, it's to apply this learning back to your own module. And then I do want you to head back into instructional cycle 3. And we are just going to take a look together at the final 2 sessions, just so everybody's had a little bit of exposure and experience with them. Session 9, this will be very familiar. It's the student work analysis session. And then 10, which is that, hey, let's reflect on what the students were showing us and use our analysis and reflections to make decisions about future instruction. So keep working on your own module. We'll see you for one-on-one sessions and then take a look at sessions 9 and 10 in instructional cycle 3. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Great to think with you as always. Have a good night.
Bye.